I'm Ben Davies, and this is the Clear Money Mindset.
People are looking, depending on what price point you're in, like we are still seeing bidding wars. So that lower price point, you know, the first time home buyers, you get a lot of investors in that spot too. So downsizers as well. So you just have a bigger pool of buyers there. So I think that's where you're still seeing some of the bidding war.
Welcome to the Clear Money Mindset. I'm Ben Davies. Our podcast today starts a really exciting series of podcasts that will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. Over the last few years, each spring, we've done a real estate roundtable with Sebastian Schmoranz, a lawyer from Kingsville, Ontario, Alyssa Ismail, a real estate agent in the Windsor-Essex region with Century 21, and Rob and Sandra Zanet, who are longtime experts and are well-known mortgage brokers in the Windsor-Essex area. They're with the Indi Mortgage Co. Well, we're doing it again this year, but a 4-part series. And we're going to be bringing you a series of topics. First, we're going to chat about the real estate markets in Windsor-Essex. Then we're going to chat about incentives for first-time home buyers. We also have a discussion focused on retirees in real estate. We're going to chat about everything from keeping a mortgage into retirement, downsizing, and the pros and cons of reverse mortgages. So the first podcast in this series, we're going to be chatting about the current Windsor-Essex real estate market. Throughout this episode, you're going to hear a lot of tips and insights on things you need to know if you're buying or selling a home in 2026. So listen in. I know you're going to enjoy this discussion. All right. Well, this is becoming a little bit of a tradition around here. That I think this is like our third or fourth real estate update with a group of professionals. We have with us Alyssa Ismail, a real estate agent from Century 21, Sebastian Schmoranz from MSSH Lawyers, and Rob and Sandra Zanet, or as we call them, Team Zanet. I think they call themselves that as well, with Indi Mortgages. Thank you so much for coming back on the podcast, and we're going to walk through a update on real estate and some of the tax incentives that have been announced. So welcome to the podcast, everybody.
Thanks. Thanks, Ben.
Great to be here. No problem. So first thing we're going to go through, I feel like this is relevant because I'm not in real estate, but it seems like it's changing fast. Everything feels like it's changing fast right now. So maybe starting out with Alyssa, could you give us a general overview of where the markets are sitting today versus where they were a year ago?
Absolutely. So our average sale price right now, our April stats just came out. We're sitting about 572. We're year over year we're within about 1%. So not a whole lot of change there, which in my opinion is a positive thing. It's a steady market. It's a stable market. I think probably Rob and Sandra see this where you're seeing conditions again. The clients are doing their due diligence. Like we're not seeing crazy volatility, which is a good thing. Averages on market, you're roughly, anywhere between 35 to 60 days. So something different than what a lot of consumers have been used to.
Yeah.
But again, statistically, like really, really low in comparison to, some previous years where houses would sit for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. So the buyers are out there. People are looking, depending on what price point you're in, like we are still seeing bidding wars. So that lower price point, the first time home buyers, you get a lot of investors in that spot too. So downsizers as well. So you just have a bigger pool of buyers there. So I think that's where you're still seeing some of the bidding war.
So would you say
tactics.
That's like under $500,000?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's probably right around the cusp.
Okay.
Again, if you have a house where market value is sitting around 700 and it's listed for 599, well, you're likely going to have a bidding war there too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've gone through several offer presentations where, we're one of 14, one of 6, one of 8, in that lower kind of price point, but it will happen in that higher echelon as well if, the agent is pricing it under market value because, we're all looking at comparables, we're all professionals, and we're making sure that, our clients are getting the best value for a home. So that's kind of a general synopsis, I would say.
So stable.
Stable.
Which is probably not bad, because then everybody knows what they have to work with.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned this, Alyssa. I'll ask you this, Sebastian. Conditions. We've seen a bit of a more reasonable return to having a condition on an offer. What are you seeing?
Yeah, so the Wild West days of the really hot real estate market during the pandemic seem to be behind us now. So as Alyssa mentioned, it's a lot more of a stable, balanced market. Yeah, we have multiple offers, but the multiple offers aren't necessarily crazy. People are actually going to see houses in person. Open houses are happening again. People are actually making sure they're lined up with their mortgages in advance. They're actually putting in conditions for financing. They're putting in conditions for home inspection. They're putting in conditions for septic inspection or any of those other kinds of things. They're actually ensuring that if there's tenants in the home, that we have language in there to ensure that the tenants get evicted prior to closing. So it's a much more methodical and thought out process. The agreements of purchase and sale are much more detailed now. We're seeing a lot more conditions in the Schedule A, all things which tend to protect the buyer and also protect the seller depending on the nature of the property being sold. So it's, from a legal perspective, it's very encouraging because we had a ton of real estate litigation that arose from a lot of the, very aggressive, very reckless buying behavior that was going on during the pandemic. Yeah. And I think a lot of that is behind us now. So a lot of the deals, we're not seeing, we're going in 50 grand over asking and we're going to close in 20 days. And, there's no conditions in here whatsoever. And we're all scrambling to get stuff done. So it's nice. It's a lot more predictable. And I think buyers and sellers are exposing themselves to a lot lower risk in terms of potential litigation.
Which is really good because, as you were saying, Alyssa, the bidding wars are in that first-time homebuyer market. The last thing you want is a bunch of young people taking on risk they don't understand and then having to possibly go through a lawsuit when you're just starting out with a brand new to you home. Your expenses are up, so I think those protections are probably a really healthy thing to have back in. Now, what about interest rates, mortgages, things like that? What are we seeing in the interest rate market? I didn't include this in the questions, but I would love to know too, like if the tariff stuff is having an effect on mortgage rates or even just the area itself and how people are feeling about Windsor-Essex. So maybe we can include that in there. But where do rates sit right now?
Well, right now you're finding that rates were impacted by the tariffs. They as soon as they started, actually more so as soon as this war in Iran started, that rates had gone up. It was, I think, just because of uncertainty more than anything else. And they have sort of subsided and they've come back down. Those are fixed rates I'm talking about. And they're pretty much holding steady right now. We're seeing that fixed rates for a standard 5-year fixed term are hovering anywhere between 4.19 to 4.59, somewhere in that range. So that's where they've been for the past couple of months. And I don't really see any movement in that. I think that that's where they're going to stay. In terms of the variable rates, Bank of Canada just met last week. They did not change the overnight lending rate. It's still at 2.25%. That's not the interest rate that the customer pays.
Right.
People always get confused with that, but that controls what the prime rate is, which in turn becomes 4.25. That did not change. And we are seeing that I don't think that's going to change either. I think that there's the prime rate and it really is dependent on what's going on in the economy. And the Bank of Canada is a really precarious position right now. There's going to be inflation.
Yeah.
Gas has gone up. Food may go up because of the gas going up. So you're going to see that there's going to be inflation. But the economy still isn't doing great. So they can't really raise rates because of the inflation. That's going to impact the economy, which is already suffering. So I don't really know what's going to happen with prime rate. And I don't even think the Bank of Canada knows what's going to happen with the prime rate. But for that reason, I think that even the variable rates are probably going to stay in the same area that they're at right now.
I have to agree. I think variable rate now makes sense. because there is a lot of uncertainty, and I do think that for all those reasons that Rob mentioned, inflation is going to go up, and Bank of Canada is going to have to try to keep inflation, low, but they're going to have to reduce borrowing costs to keep people spending.
Yeah, I don't covet being a central banker right now, because the things you're normally fighting, you're usually fighting like one of these at a time. You don't have the inflation. Not often, at least in the last few years, have we seen, or I think even back to 2008, they've either had to fight inflation or they've had to bring rates down to stimulate the economy. And now they're in a position where the economy is not doing that well, and we have inflation at the same time. And you don't want to make big decisions on the upside right now because you could hurt people, but you don't want to make big decisions to lower the rates because you might run out of runway to actually stimulate the economy later. So it's kind of a catch-22, especially in Canada. It's hard to see what they're going to do in the long term.
I would say if I'm going to be the optimist in the room, which never happens because lawyers are pessimists by nature, I would say, though, and you do see the reports, the one upside of the high oil price is the federal government is going to make a whole pile of money off of the taxes that it collects on oil, which, if one of the world's largest economies continues being as unpredictable as it is with our lovely orange gentleman to the south, I think it might spur a COVID level event where the federal government starts thinking, a certain amount of stimulus spending is important to give us the time to adapt our trading networks to other countries. And the way I think this translates into housing is, which there's a lot of noise on the internet with various, housing blogs and housing podcasts where it's, now's the best time to buy. I would genuinely say, if you have a job that is recession-proof, or if you have a job in Windsor-Essex that isn't necessarily entirely dependent on manufacturing for the auto sector, because we always forget Windsor-Essex has tons of manufacturing that isn't auto sector related, and they're doing just fine. Prices are great right now, and the interest rates really don't suck at all. The interest rates really are, in the grand scheme of things, sure, there might be some younger millennials or some older Gen Zs that say, well, I'm waiting to go back to the 1.5% that happened in 2021. I mean, we're never going to see that again in our lives, realistically. We might, but it's a generational event because it was a global pandemic, right? So I think if you're ready, and if you have the money, and if you've got your down payment figured out, or if you've got parents who are going to help you, or you're confident that your job is not going anywhere in the next little bit, you're a nurse, you're a teacher, you're a professional, or you work, you have a blue collar job, but it isn't tied directly to Ford, Chrysler, GM. Yeah. I think there's no better time than now to say, it's time to take the plunge and buy this house. Because if we do end up in an inflationary environment, there's a chance the rates go up again. If we do end up in a stimulus spending environment, there's a chance that, bidding wars happen on houses again, and it drives the house prices up. So we're kind of in a really nice little kind of window of time where I think maybe the next 6 months, which again, we can't predict what happens south of the border, but assuming nothing else even crazier happens in the next 6 months south of the border, I think it might be a really nice window of time to say, let's take the plunge and buy this house now.
Yeah, and even from a cash flow perspective, I got to think, like, I've had a number of clients this year, you're going through their cash flow, their budget, and the rate went up. And the jump from like 2.5 to 4, 5, 5.5, that's enough for them to be like, wow, that really stung. So at least right now they're getting into the market where you couldn't imagine the rates are doubling. So if they're going up, they're going up incrementally. It's not such a cash flow shock. They can be a bit more responsible with can they actually afford that if things change? Because there are many families now who they eked into the best house they could get at the lowest rate they'll have for life, probably. I don't think you want an economy where rates are quite that low, below inflation. So it's from a cash flow planning perspective and kind of being fiscally responsible as a person or as a family. I think having the rates here probably better for long-term planning too. So since houses are moving slower, what are some recommendations for if I'm selling? Assessing whether I'm going to stage the home, what I'm going to pay to do that, or there's some stuff I want to do around the house. We're actually seeing this a lot like in our own client base. That's why I love forums like this, because I can ask the questions I get. Is like, you have people who are getting close to retirement. And they're like, okay, well, we got to renovate this room, that room, and that room, and it's sounding like a whole house reno, and then we'll sell it. Alyssa, what are some things people can do to maximize the value, and how do they assess whether it's worth it or not?
Great question. I think the first easiest thing is clean. Like, you just want to walk into a home that's clean. So that first step, like, you want to make sure.
That sounds personal too. As a real estate agent, sounds like you might like that as well.
We get to experience a lot of different lifestyle choices when we walk into homes. So like the worst thing that can happen is you walk into a house, you know, they haven't picked up a broom, a mop, a vacuum, anything. The dishes are still in the sink. There's no pride of ownership. So first and foremost, and which is probably the easiest because it's your own sweat equity, unless you're going to hire a company to do it if you're unable, is just making sure the house is clean. And I tell my clients, even who have, you know, beautiful, clean homes, clean like you've never cleaned before. Like any surface in your home that you're like, oh, no, it's fine. Clean all the baseboards, all the windows, everything, because all of it lends itself to painting a beautiful picture of this property. Now, on the consumer side, when a buyer comes into a house that they see has been meticulous, they're like, these people took care of this home. So they're not automatically looking for things like, oh, well, have they been maintaining it properly? Because that's kind of the biggest thing, is you want to make sure you're buying a house from somebody who's had a pride of ownership and has maintained the home. Well, typically, if you walk into a home that is being neglected, you kind of make that assumption that, well, what else have they been neglecting, right? On the other side of things, staging works wonders. You know, we recommend staging a lot, in the sense it's not even necessarily bringing furniture in, but some of it is editing furniture out. The way you live in your home and the best way to present it to a consumer typically are different. So when somebody's coming to a house, you want to make sure it feels as large and inviting as possible.
Okay.
So how you might want to sit around your television at night with your family and all your extra, you know, coffee tables and cozy blankets and books and everything like that works for the family and is more so like your day to day. But as people are coming in, first of all, they want to envision their own thing. So less is more in that sense. And maybe we don't need all those ottomans in the living room that are keeping you extra comfy because it's ruining the flow of walking and that. And people might think, okay, well, you know, that living room is not as big as I was hoping it to be.
Right.
Things like that. Closets are a big one because people are going to open up your closets. They want to see the closets. If your closets are jam-packed full of stuff, they're like, oh, is there not enough storage in this house?
That's an interesting point.
Things like that. Like there's a lot of small things that don't cost any money, essentially, that consumers can do to help the value of their home. Now, if a house is empty, typically we'll stage it. As much as you think an empty home would feel bigger, a home feels bigger with furniture in it, for the most part. Most people are very visual in that sense. So sometimes you get people who can't picture what the living room would look like or picture what the bedrooms would look like in that situation. But we work with some great staging companies. You'd have to chat with your agent whether the cost is going to be on the agent or the cost is going to be picked up by the sellers.
Okay.
For me, I pay for staging. I think it's a great service that I can provide. It's something I can advocate for. When homes are presented better, we typically get a better result for the seller. So I'm happy to put that cost, pay that cost up front and just get the home presented in the best light. Now, if we're talking renovating anything, I know you mentioned like consumer clients saying, okay, well, I need to do this room, this room, this room. A lot of times just a fresh coat of paint does the trick.
Okay.
Fresh coat of paint, again, tidying up, all of that. To say that renovating a kitchen, renovating a bathroom, like typically they do add value. To say that it's going to add the same value that you put into it, we can't necessarily make that correlation. But bathrooms and kitchens are kind of the two main things that a buyer is going to say, okay, well, these are going to be a larger expense.
Right.
Versus, painting a bedroom, updating some trim, things like that. But if you're going to do that, you are kind of going to be wanting to pick something that appeals to the masses. It's not necessarily going to be the kitchen that you want in this house.
Yeah, I was going to ask
love.
that because it doesn't. That's one thing that's run through my mind is, do you really want to be the one deciding what the next person who buys your house wants their kitchen to look like? Because that's essentially what you're trying to do. So then, I guess neutral.
Yeah, because at that point you'd be guessing, right? Like, who's going to buy this house? What do I think they're going to like? And you're guessing. Well, if you just kind of go neutral palette, it typically does appeal to the masses in that sense. But it's, there's some
so
pros, cons.
Be cautious.
Be cautious. And I would go the less expensive routes of cleaning, painting, staging before I pulled the trigger on a big reno. Because also like timelines and things like that, like if you're looking to move, let's call it within the next 6 months, and you decide you want to get into a kitchen reno, for those who have done a kitchen reno, I'm one of them. The timelines don't usually stay the same.
Yeah.
Something gets backordered.
And neither does the budget.
Yes, and neither does the budget. So the budget typically changes. The timeline typically changes. So if you're kind of under the gun and you're trying to plan something and the next move for your family, you think you do the smaller things and you make it really presentable and get it to market in the best shape you possibly can as it is, versus trying to get a crystal ball and guess who the buyer is going to be and what they want.
Yeah. And if you're going to go through all that work at the end of the day and you're only going to get out of it the extra value you put in, or maybe a bit more, that's a lot of headache.
Yeah. Do you want to live through that renovation?
That's a lot of headache. Okay, cool. And then on the buying and selling side of offers, Sebastian, now that we have more time and people don't have to feel like there's a gun to their head to put an offer in now, what are some tips you can give buyers and sellers just to be a bit more methodical as they're putting offers together in an environment where there's a little bit of time?
I think so. My rule of thumb for this year, which is this is something This is something I said during the pandemic, but my clients never wanted to listen. Also because the market didn't allow them to listen. But my advice, pretty much to every buyer this year, is if something doesn't look right to you, just walk away. The nice thing is we have enough inventory on the market right now that you do not need to have that level of desperation that a lot of the buyers had 3, 4, or 5 years ago, where, I know this house isn't perfect, but we've run the numbers and I think we can get the mortgage. And if we don't pull the trigger on this now, then we're back to like doing multiple offers on the next house or multiple offers on the house after that. And so there was a lot of kind of desperation that said, nope, this is the one. I don't care. I'm going to look past all these problems. I'm going to buy it anyway.
Yeah.
And then I had tons of people who then were stuck dealing with all sorts of skeletons in the closet for years and years afterwards. Or they're the people who are now getting screwed with interest rates going up because they could barely afford it to begin with and then had to pay out of pocket or borrow more money to fix all sorts of big problems. So we had I had a new buyer that was referred to me by a realtor who was dealing with they wanted to put an offer on a house and the listing was unclear as to, because the house had a large vacant lot next to it.
Yep.
And the listing was very unclear as to whether did it include or not include the lot. And they made a conditional offer, assuming that they were getting the house with the empty space next to it, only to be told by the listing agent prior to the deal going firm and prior to a deposit being paid, no, actually, the sellers just applied for a severance and there's going to be a severance. And so, is there an argument to be made, when the market was tighter, like, no, we're going to fight about this because, it was misdescribed in the listing and we have an issue and as long as our buyer pays a deposit, we could fight this out in court and, it's worth doing because when are you going to find another house like this? And they were first-time home buyers and their dad was helping them with the down payment and the dad was obviously very upset. But I was like, look, man, you don't want to waste all this time and money.
Yeah.
And there's at least another 20 or 30 comparable listings on the market right now in that price range. So don't waste your time. Just walk away. Nobody's paid a deposit yet anyway. Let it be. Just go and pick something else. Yeah. Because there isn't that crazy sense of urgency anymore.
Yeah.
There are still bidding wars, but the bidding wars aren't insane. And most of the bidding wars still involve buyers making offers with conditions. So it's not even the case of like, well, we got to come in real strong, no conditions. You're going to bid 100,000 over asking, and then you can get it for sure. It's not really necessary. It's more so we're now, negotiating on the margins of like, well, we bid 5,000 more, or we bid 10,000 more, or, we don't need a home inspection condition, or we, our financing is lined up. We don't want a financing condition, but we still want a home inspection. So to me, it's more so, if you walk in and you see major issues, don't buy the house. You don't have to. The nice thing is there's enough inventory now to be like, you don't have to be so desperate that you have to accept this property with these problems just because there's nothing else, or because the market's so competitive, or you're a first-time home buyer, there's nothing else you can afford. There's lots. We did our first real estate deal a couple of weeks ago again, where the house was sold for like $320,000. So like it exists again. It's not 2021 where a $300,000 home is sold for $475,000, and I had to look at the listing 4 times because I didn't believe that the number was right. Yeah. Right. So. That's really my catchphrase for the year is walk away. If you find a thing you like, put some conditions in, chances are you'll probably get accepted. Buy that house. Yeah. Don't walk in and say, oh my God, if we don't buy this house, there won't be any other houses. There's going to be lots of other houses. It'll be fine.
Well, it's even in just like investing in life in general, like markets of any kind, usually like the times when they're incredibly low and incredibly high are typically short. And then eventually everyone goes back to what's it worth? What am I actually paying for?
You regress to the mean. You go back to the average.
Mm-hmm. And so you want to wind up in either of those situations holding on to an asset worth the value that everyone around on a regular day is willing to pay for that. So if you rushed in to buy the house with all the problems, when the value goes back to the mean, you're holding on to a house that's not worth as much as what you paid for. And if you can avoid that.
And the worst thing is we saw that a lot with out-of-town buyers who came in during the pandemic, especially the Kingsville area, with work from home stuff, or people who were, decided, I'll take early retirement. I'm ready to retire. And paid cash, didn't do inspections, paid cash, and very much overpaid. Yeah. And now are either discovering the house that they're in is not the house that they wanted it to be, or they're realizing small town life is not for me. I want to move back to a city, and are realizing, I'm not going to get this money back when I sell this house. And unlike, at least if it was a rental property, you could write off the losses against your income. But on a principal residence, you just made a bad financial decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are hard to recover from.
They are very painful.
All right. So on the mortgage side of things, have there been any changes there? Like, again, you guys are here for a reason. I'm not a mortgage expert, but I would think maybe in a market that's becoming more realistic, like the shape of the house, different things that need to be done. What is it actually worth? But I'll let you guys answer this question. What are mortgage companies looking at? Is it just as easy to get approved, or are there any major changes in mortgage approvals?
I think that it's basically the same. There's no difference. They're evolving, with the prices, with the market. Yeah. So I find that nothing's really changed that way. The only thing I can say that's maybe changed or gotten a little bit worse is the lenders are more particular. They want to dot their I's, cross their T's. They want to make sure the documents jive, the letter to the pay stub to the T4. And if there's even remotely a discrepancy, they're catching it immediately. It's almost like they're detectives. So it's really important to make sure that you work with someone that is going to check those documents up front. We do a fully underwritten pre-approval. So we know that if we're telling a client to go ahead and make an offer, if they did need to make an offer without any conditions, we're confident that we're going to get them the financing. Yeah. I find, meeting condition of financing dates is attainable. We have a very structured office, so everything gets done very quickly. We don't want to leave anyone in limbo waiting, because everything, follows a schedule. So other than that, I think it's just really important to know who you're dealing with, make sure that you trust that everything's going to be checked out as soon as you put that in your cart, that you're going to be getting a mortgage. So
when you talk about like the details and them being kind of like detectives, I think of a situation that happens often where a couple with great income goes to buy a house right at the time where someone gets a job offer down the street at a different employer and changes jobs. Do you see that happening a lot? And are those kind of the details you're talking about where they can't necessarily, they're going to have to somehow prove income again, but they can't necessarily prove it in their past employer because
or they decide they want to finance a luxury car, 3 weeks before closing.
All of that happens. All of the
I love those clients.
Yeah.
We've had it happen. We're right in the middle of a mortgage approval. Lenders typically, or an underwriter will contact an employer. They'll check that employment letter and they'll make sure that they're still working there. So that has happened, but we've been lucky enough that usually it's in the same industry and it's not really a problem.
Yeah.
Sometimes probation tends to be a little bit of an issue, where if you get a new job and you're on probation, if it's in an unrelated field, that could be an issue. But again, we've been able to work through those scenarios too.
Okay. And I think part of the problem is if you look, there was a ton of mortgage fraud in the GTA during the pandemic boom years. And I think a lot of these bigger lenders like First National and ComputerShare got burned. And so we're seeing it on the legal side of things too. So the nice thing about dealing with brokers like Team Zanet is they do all the homework so that usually the underwriter at the lender already trusts like 98% that these people are who they say they are and we're going to fund. But what we're finding is when we get referrals from, less experienced brokerages, they're having legal do a lot of follow up too. And if things don't match, or if the dates aren't the same, or if it isn't exactly the date on the bill that they want to see, then it's, we need this or we need this again. I think they've really put a lot of money into the underwriting review. That didn't used to be the case. The underwriters, I think, used to just got paid a commission based on how many deals they closed, and they realized that might be a bad idea if brokers are lying to us or if real estate lawyers are lying to us. There's actually, if you type it into Google, you'll see there's about 5 to 10 lawyers in Ontario that have been disbarred in the last couple months for shady activities that they engaged in the GTA during the boom years. And I think you're seeing a lot of the bigger lenders are saying, okay, we would love to lend you money, but we're actually going to look at everything. And if anything seems fishy, we're going to make you send it to us again and explain over and over again.
And the other part of that as well is the due diligence they're doing down payments. With FinTrack getting stricter and stricter, they're trying to prevent any money laundering. They're scrutinizing bank statements to find out where this down payment has come from, and it's worse than ever in terms of that. So yes, we have to do our due diligence up front. We can't, and we had a situation just this week where someone wants to have a suitcase full of cash and they want to buy a house, and you can't do that anymore. Those things aren't possible.
They want to know where the money came from.
Yeah, they want to know where the money comes from.
Under the mattress.
Yes. And we have situations where parents are giving gifts of money for the down payment. And we had a client who said their father-in-law would not sign the gift letter. And I said, well, then you can't use his money. And the father-in-law could not understand that. I'm giving him the money. I don't want to sign anything. Well, it's not the case. We have to have a paper trail of all of that, and or else the down payment will not be accepted by the lenders now.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal, financial, or professional advice. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Sterling Mutuals, Inc. Mutual funds and ETFs provided through Sterling Mutuals, Inc. Commissions, trailing commissions, management fees, and expenses all may be associated with mutual fund investments. Please read the fund facts before investing. Mutual funds are not guaranteed, their values change frequently, and past performance may not be repeated.